Hello and welcome to today's event, What Adjunct and Contingent Faculty Need to Know About Public Service Loan Forgiveness and Managing Their Student Loans. My name is Walter Susskind. I'm the Deputy Communications Director of the Student Borrower Protection Center, and we're thrilled to be partnering with the American Association of University Professors and the American Federation of Teachers for today's event. So today during our presentation, we will have information and resources that you, the attendees, can use to learn more about managing your student loans and accessing PSLF. After the presentation, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. A recording of today's event will be made available sometime tomorrow. But before our presentation, we'll begin today's event by speaking with two leaders from AFT and AAUP. Jerry O'Brien Losi comes to us from AFT New York State Local 2190 United University Professions, where she serves 37,000 members as a statewide secretary and treasurer. Jerry is trained by AFT to deliver student debt clinics and has been holding virtual clinics since 2019, including virtually throughout the entire pandemic. Caprice Lawless teaches English at Front Range Community College. In addition to co-leading the Colorado State Conference, she recently served as vice president of the National AAUP and chairs the Committee on Contingency in the Profession Committee. Jerry, Caprice, thank you both so much for being here with us today.
Thanks so much, everybody, for being here.
Well, I'll kick it off. And Caprice, as both an adjunct professor and someone engaging with fellow adjuncts all around the country, what do you think are particular challenges faced by this community when managing student debt and trying to access PSLF?
Well, Walter, thanks for having me. First of all, adjuncts, in many cases, adjuncts are limited in the number of classes they can teach per semester in order for these schools to get around the Affordable Care Act. For example, in Colorado, we are limited to teaching only 3 classes a semester, and they have to have a special permission to teach more than that. And consequently, we have teachers who are even earning less than poverty wages. At the same time, they're trying to pay off their student debts. So we're kind of damned if we do and damned if we don't. And they're the most devoted teachers this country's ever seen. And they teach some of the most disadvantaged students in the state of Colorado. It's just not fair. We need to fix it.
Thank you so much. And I think, hearing from both of you, speaking on behalf of, this critical profession and this, like you said, people that are serving on the front lines, I think it'll be really important both for attendees to hear these voices, but also for policymakers to know all these individualized groups who, are relying on PSLF. Jerry, I want to turn to you. You serve on behalf of tens of thousands of adjuncts across New York State. When I saw the number of 37,000, kind of my eyes popped out a little. But, similar to Caprice, when you talk to members, are there certain specific problems that people mention they're encountering when they're trying to apply and access, across the whole PSLF experience?
Yes, Walter, thank you. The issue, especially with adjuncts with contingent, is the fact that they don't realize that they might qualify for public service loan forgiveness. You add to it the issue of shame and that loan carries. You add to it going from college to college. People don't always realize, and I think that's a little telling. We should have all thousands of my people at least on today's call. And when I first started holding debt clinics, we didn't see many adjuncts. And as word started to spread, because part of the presentation does say, this is what you have to do if you to qualify for public service loan forgiveness, people all of a sudden were like, oh, well, I work at 3 different colleges, or I work at a 501c3 and a college. And in my case, in New York, in my particular chapter, I was the one who brought public service loan forgiveness when it's to our HR office. So you have people who don't know on the ground that are quite busy trying to lead their lives and pay their bills. And you've got HRs that don't always know what's going on either. And that's a deadly combination, I think.
Those are great points. And Jerry, I think one thing you touched on there is this shame idea of, and I think we don't just see it here, we see it across the student loan borrowers of, I'm the only one carrying debt like this. And then when you look up and you realize your neighbors, your friends, just how widespread this is. And that's why we think this, pressing for, fixes to PSLF and delivering on this promise, because there are just so many people. Caprice, do you also hear, Jerry also mentioned the lack of communication where the offices don't know about it, don't know where to deliver that information, and people don't know where to find it. How do you all, what are ways you see that can be dealt with, or, how does that problem kind of, how do we bridge that communication break that we see?
Right. Where we are, the HR departments are handmaids of administration, and not exactly the most user-friendly group. So it's likely that most of my colleagues don't even know about this program. Don't even know about it. And I have friends who have been teaching so long they're ready to retire. They're still paying their student debts.
And Jerry, do you want to?
No, I'm sorry. And
I
think for me, it's been what's helped is the consistency. I offer the clinics every payday, every state payday. I offer a clinic and rotate between an afternoon clinic and an evening clinic. And it's been word of mouth. It's been allies who have been attending those, the sessions that reach out to others and encourage them to reach out to me. And a large part of my my presentation actually talks about, like, at the end of the day, I'm not a big scary person. Like, if you have, I've had people that I've sat in for the first 15 minutes, I burst into tears, I had to go. Because again, the shame that goes along with it. But at the end of the day, I've also had people attend 5 clinics until they're ready to actually take action.
Yeah. And you talk about that, helping people realize they're not alone. Jerry, would you be, I know, in our emails you've mentioned, but would you be willing to talk about I know you're someone that's trying to access PSL. Talk about your experience a little.
Oh yeah. I have 3 student loans left. I'm about at 73, just to 73,000 and change. I have 2 loans that did make it into PSLF. One of the big things I was not informed of, I'll just say, was that my 3rd loan could have been converted into something else. Of course, that was my $55,000 loan. The other 2 were like $6,000, and and so I actually just went through the temporary public service loan forgiveness program, and I had 91 of my payments I didn't think were going to count. 91 were counted under temporary programs. So I went from 2036 being done to less than 12 payments now. Yesterday, I got a phone call. It was actually right before we did our pre-meeting. I got a phone call from somebody who had $190,000 forgiven. I have a member with $163,000, one with $34,000 that have been these are the completion stories, not even in process. And just speaking about retirees, we had, and I know Alyssa's going to talk about summer later, but when we first experimented with summer, we had a person, our Binghamton, New York, SUNY Binghamton chapter, and she didn't think she could retire. And she went through summer, got things straightened out, her questions answered. She found out she could retire in 2 years and had $48,000 forgiven. And it's really for me, I bring up my stuff. There is no shame. And I was so terrified. I actually didn't go through the program itself until almost 2 years of training on the program, because I was so intimidated by my experience.
Yeah.
So it does work. It's, bureaucracy, but it can work.
And do you think, both of you think some of that intimidation of how cumbersome this process is definitely, do you think it's holding people back from even taking that first step?
Yes. I think that people had such a horrible experience in the last federal administration and the way things were run, they're reluctant to try again. And I think that's, that's the constant reiteration of just come, just try, just make it, make an attempt. You're not alone. Because, I was turned down. I was turned down the first time with temporary loan forgiveness as well, because I didn't have the documentation, which of course makes me feel worse because I didn't have the documentation of denial. Yeah. So it's convincing people who may have tried when it first started and converting it to, let's try again. We're in a different time. We've had more experience with ways to get through. That actually is a huge factor in getting people to attend clinics and be able to work toward forgiveness. Mm-hmm.
It's also, once people, and I'm interested from both of you, once people are in it and members you've talked to who are in it, what are roadblocks, farther up the path that you hear from members talk about? What problems are they running into, whether it's with servicers, et cetera, that you all hear about?
I'm sorry, Caprice, do you want to go first?
No,
I could talk about this all day long.
I want you to.
I could talk all day long. I could talk about this. So for me, some of it has been little things, because as part of the clinic, we actually look at the form. So you say, okay, now turn over the form, sign the top of page 2, and make sure that because in the previous administration, it would be an automatic no, because you didn't fill out something. Number 6 on the form that says, are you still employed? That doesn't get filled out. Which is a little bit better now. They may berate you with emails about, okay, we got this, but we need that. Now this is too old, so you have to start over. But they're kind of different problems a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things right now I'm getting is if it's somebody who knows they've screwed up, like a person that AFT may be suing a company, that they don't quite answer your question. So you'll say, I want to go in public service loan forgiveness. And they'll say, well, your program doesn't count towards public service loan forgiveness. That's because you're a Naviant. It's not because you don't have anything else right. It's just because of that. So there are still we're not giving the wrong information, but kind of situations.
Mm-hmm. And with situations like that, where, that little wrong information is the difference between tens of thousands of dollars of debt these people are carrying. Caprice, I had a question, I think more broadly, we're hoping, with, everything that's going on, that there will be fixes to PSLF, but looking at, the adjunct community specifically, what are the implications if public service loan forgiveness is not fixed and this promised relief isn't delivered, both for this community and probably for higher education as a whole?
Adjunctification is not sustainable. I just had a meeting today with people from AAP. I said, my major challenge as an organizer is not losing members to AAP, it's losing colleagues to the profession itself. They're leaving. They can make more money almost anywhere else. Many of the students in our classes earn more money at their Starbucks jobs than we earn on our jobs teaching them. So the problems are tremendous. And, we've had many adjunct survival workshops that the AUP chapters have put on. We connect adjuncts to food banks. We have people come to show them how to apply for food stamps, subsidized housing. In Colorado, we have a clearinghouse for low-cost subsidized health care. I teach people how to use local agencies that offer help with car repairs and water bills and electricity bills. And so, the next adjunct workshop, I'm hoping we can have something about this public loan forgiveness program, or this public service loan forgiveness program, because it's such a tremendous problem. It's just horrible what's happening. And I rent out rooms in my house to make ends meet. And I've had several adjuncts who, they're full-time jobs well, they call them part-time, but they actually work full-time. But their jobs, even with graduate degrees, they don't earn enough money to have their own apartment. They have to rent rooms in people's houses, and it's just heartbreaking. And it's wrong. And we're one of the best countries, or one of the richest countries. Higher education is the promise of our future. It's not right that this is happening. And we are smart people. We can address this.
Absolutely. I think that's kind of a great wrap up. Thank you both so much. But would there be anything, we've been doing, running this campaign since the Department of Education started saying we want to hear from public service workers. And we've heard from public service workers from all walks of life, from all professions. But I think it's really important with these presentations that we do that we get to hear from specific populations that sometimes might be overlooked. And so I would just ask both of you if you want to leave with anything of what would you like policymakers to, hear or know about, adjuncts and student debt. And, like Caprice, you kind of said it all, but if there's anything you'd like to kind of leave the attendees with and anyone, in government listening.
I would. I have the perfect coda here for you. Even in what our community college system in the state of Colorado is the most financially secure institution of higher education in our state. We're highly rated by Moody's. The administrators park 20 million every year in other funds because they can't spend it all. We got basically 3/4 of our annual revenue as a boon from the federal government, part of the CARES and all this Recovery Act from COVID. What do you do when you're an administrator who gets 170 million handed to you? When enrollment only declined by 0.5%, you don't give it to the adjuncts. We got a raise. Walter. It's $5 a week. And we're talking about people who are earning 10,000 below the living wage already. So it's just criminal what's happening.
For me, I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks to opening it up to more people is that 30-hour a week. Even if you combine jobs, which that's what most adjuncts I work with don't realize, you can combine multiple jobs, but it's that even lowering that by 5 hours would make such a difference just in who would be, continually be eligible. And then just like, I don't know, it'd be great to have a mandate that people actually were given the correct information. That would be great too.
Yeah, it's those fixes like that. Well, thank you both so much. The problems of higher education doesn't happen without people like you and the members you all work with. So thank you both so much. Now, for everyone watching, I'm going to have Chris Hicks from the Student Borrower Protection Center walk us through a presentation on student loan management and public service loan forgiveness. Caprice, Jerry, thank you all so much again.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Hicks. I'm a senior fellow at the Student Borrower Protection Center. In the participant list, I actually recognize a few names. I used to work at the American Federation of Teachers in the higher ed department, so it's good to see some familiar names. And just as I go through this presentation, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box or in the chat after my presentation, which I'm going to try and keep short so we can get to the Q&A. We're going to be going through that section with Jerry and Caprice also helping to lead it. So just very quickly, what I'm going to be covering is a quick overview of the student debt crisis and where we stand today, how to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And I'm going to be going through it in the order that we see people most frequently denied or knocked off track. So this presentation, just so you know, will be made available afterwards. I know a lot of people ask for it as we go through it. Because I'm going to be trying to move quick, I just want to say at the beginning, you will get a copy of this. It will be made available. It's going to be posted to our website. So you can also share it with colleagues and coworkers, friends and family, anyone that you think might benefit from getting this material. I'm just going to quickly touch on some of the protections that exist today under the payment pause because of COVID, and a few things that we know are going to be changing moving forward. We're then going to move into the Q&A. So bear with me as I try and get through some of these opening bits. Your questions, your experience is the most important part of this. We just want to provide this information to help frame some of the conversation we have towards the end. And again, Caprice and Jerry are going to be keeping an eye on the Q&A and chat. So as I go through this, if you have questions, don't worry about saving them until the Q&A section. Go ahead, type them up and put them in. But just very quickly, if you've thought student debt is in the news more often, if you feel like student debt is a problem that's getting worse, if you feel like your situation is not what it was the generation before you, that is absolutely correct. In the last decade, student debt has grown by more than $1 trillion. It is growing faster than any other form of consumer debt, and it is impacting 1 out of every 5 households today. This is a really big macro number. It's 1.5 trillion today. We're adding, on average, more than $100 billion every academic year, full academic calendar year. So this is impacting young people. This is impacting people that have been in repayment for the last decade. This is impacting, as you heard between Jerry and Caprice, people that are eyeing retirement or have already retired. We know more than 100,000 retirees had their Social Security checks garnished in the last decade because of unpaid student debt. So this is growing at a macro level very quickly, but also at a micro level, households are feeling it more. Student debt on house-to-house balance sheets is growing quicker than any other form of consumer debt. If you, over a 10-year time period, starting in 2008 with the Great Recession to just a couple of years ago. So while we know this is growing on a big macro level, it's also growing how people feel it in their personal pocketbooks or their household income. Student debt is increasingly a burden on families across the country, across age ranges, across experiences, first generation students to legacy students. It's becoming an inescapable experience that is a drag on our entire economy. So in response to the growing student debt burden, Congress 14 years ago created a program called Public Service Loan Forgiveness. I'm going to try and not use the acronym, but I might slip into it. It's PSLF. So Public Service Loan Forgiveness was signed by George W. Bush back in 2007 with a very simple premise. Congress was very clear when they passed it what its intent was. Anyone who works 10 years in the public service should have their loans forgiven. It was very simple. It was very straightforward. Unfortunately, when it got to the Department of Education, the way they stood this program up was the way they stand a lot of programs up, which is to say they created needless bureaucracy that has knocked people off track left and right. So while the original intent was 10 years of public service would be enough, the Department of Education staff and leadership added these 4 requirements and criteria that you have to meet. The first is you have to have the right type of loan. The second is you have to be on the right type of repayment plan. The third is you have to be in the right type of employment full-time. And the fourth is you have to make the right number of payments. So just very quickly, the right type of loan, it's a direct loan. The right type of repayment plan, it's an income-driven repayment plan. The right kind of employer, public service is very broadly defined. It's any level of government, any 501c3 nonprofit, and a lot of other forms of nonprofits. And then the right type of payments is just on-time payments. So if you think about it that way, it sounds like a very easy to operationalize program. As we know, when you add this administrative burden to any program, things quickly go awry, especially when you have government mismanagement and industry abuse. So those two things paired together over the last 14 years have led to this being one of the most complicated federal programs out there to really rob a generation of public service workers benefits they were entitled to. Now, I'm going to walk through and break down a little bit more slowly how to make sure you've got the right kind of loan, you're in the right kind of repayment plan, you're working at the right kind of employer, and how to double check that, and then how to make sure you're making qualifying payments. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you have a direct loan. This is the number one reason why people are being denied public service loan forgiveness today. Since 2010, October 2010, anyone who's gone to college and had to take out a federal loan, they probably have one of these direct loans. It's the most common. Prior to 2010, though, that October 1st, 2010 date, there was a different sort of loan program that the federal government gave out that was the most common. About 80% of the loans that were given out prior to 2010 were called FFEL, or Federal Family Education Loans. If you look at your bill, it'll say something like FFEL Stafford. So again, FFEL Stafford. Those were the most common before 2010. I started college in 2005. I had a FFEL Stafford loan. And if I wanted to take advantage of public service loan forgiveness, what that means is I would have had to consolidate it into a direct consolidation loan. This is not a difficult process. If you've got an older FFEL loan or an older Perkins loan, you can do this in a pretty quick, like 15-minute online application. The process is done typically within 3 weeks at studentloans.gov. What you need to do is just go there, click consolidation. It's the bottom right corner. You're going to get a form. It's going to ask you which loans you want to consolidate. Anything that's not a direct loan, you most likely need to consolidate in order to get the benefits of public service loan forgiveness. If you've already got some direct loans, but you also have some FFEL loans, you'll want to make sure that you're not consolidating loans that you've built credit towards public service loan forgiveness on, because when you consolidate those direct loans with your older FFEL loans, it restarts the clock. Because what happens is the Department of Ed pays off both of your former loans and they issue a new loan, which means you've never made a payment, you've never missed a payment. So if you're in default, consolidation is a quick way to cure that default, to get out of default. If you've made 80 payments towards public service loan forgiveness, that would wipe out all 80. So you want to make sure that you're not going to lose credit, but you need to have a direct loan in order to get the benefit of public service loan forgiveness. About 40% of people applying for public service loan forgiveness today, regardless of how long they've worked in the public service, the number one reason why they're being rejected is because of this. Their student loan company, this is actually what Jerry was saying earlier. Her student loan company didn't tell her she needed to consolidate that one loan that was worth $55,000. And that's why people continue to have to make payments. So make sure that you've got a direct loan. All you need to do is log in to your student loan servicing company's account or website, and you should be able to see what the loan type is. Or look at your monthly bill. It should say FFEL Stafford. It should say Ford Direct, those sorts of things. So you want to see the word direct. Now, if you have a Parent Plus loan, it can qualify for public service loan forgiveness. You need to consolidate that, and we suggest that you consolidate it separately of other loans. So when you go through the consolidation process, just so you know, you will see a list of all of the loans you have, and you have to physically check the ones you want to consolidate. So if you have a Parent Plus loan, check that one and just do it on its own. If you have both direct and FFEL, just click the FFEL loans. You don't have to consolidate all of your loans together. You get to pick which ones consolidate. So again, you want to make sure the word direct is in your loan type. If you've got a Parent Plus loan, you want to do that separate. And if you've got Perkins, FFEL, and direct, or some combination of those, you just want to make sure that you're not resetting the clock on any direct loans that you've built PSLF or public service loan forgiveness credit on. The second requirement, this is also one that's tripped a lot of people up, and it's the reason why they've had to create temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness. You have to be on the right kind of repayment plan. Broadly speaking, this means an income-driven repayment plan. Any of them will work, whether it's income contingent repayment, income-based repayment, pay-as-you-earn, or revised pay-as-you-earn. You just need to be in this umbrella of income-driven repayment plans. The other repayment plan that always works is going to be a standard 10-year repayment plan. The reason why you wouldn't want to be on that if you're hoping to get public service loan forgiveness is the standard 10-year repayment plan requires you to make payments that would have you pay the exact amount you would need to pay over 10 years to pay your loan off entirely, which means if you did that for 10 years, there would be no loan balance left to forgive. So the way you take advantage of public service loan forgiveness is by being in an income-driven repayment plan that ties your monthly bill to a portion, to a percentage of your income, typically 10 to 15%. And if your income is low enough, you're going to be asked to pay a $0 a month payment. That $0 payment will count towards the 120 payments you need to make for public service loan forgiveness. So you want to look into income-driven repayment plans as the best way to take advantage of public service loan forgiveness. But if you've previously been in a standard 10-year repayment plan, those payments will be credited towards the 120 qualifying payments. Now, if you're in an extended repayment plan, those payments will not qualify for the purposes of public service loan forgiveness. Lots of student loan companies have misled borrowers into believing they would be, but they will not. So you want to make sure you're not in an extended repayment plan. Similarly, graduated repayment plans typically will not count towards public service loan forgiveness, but they can count towards temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness. There's some weird nooks and particulars about this. It's easier to just kind of skim over it for the moment because of the payment pause. Right now, if you are trying to get temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness, this is going to be easier than it typically is. But the rule of thumb is your graduated repayment plan would need to be greater, like you would need to be paying more than you would in an income-driven repayment plan. Because of the payment pause, everyone's being asked to pay $0. So if you're paying any amount in a graduated repayment plan right now, you're going to meet that threshold. But if and when payments resume, that's where it gets a little bit tricky. And if you need help getting through temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness, you can always reach out to us and we can kind of help guide you through that process. If you need to consolidate a loan to get a direct loan, the consolidation application actually has a box you can check that says, put me in an income-driven repayment plan. So if you've got one of those older FFEL loans or a Perkins loan and need to consolidate, you can take care of both your repayment plan and loan type in one form. Then you have to have the right kind of employment, which is the biggest barrier for adjuncts and contingent faculty. I think both Caprice and Jerry really laid this out. But I'll start from the top and then we'll get to the issues that adjuncts and contingents face. It doesn't matter what you do, it only matters who employs you. So when I talk about this, the easiest way to explain it is you could be a president of a university, a tenure faculty professor, an adjunct, or a janitor at a public or nonprofit college, and that is the right kind of employment. As long as you work in the public service, it can be the federal government, state government, county, municipal, tribal territories, any level of government, or any qualifying 501c3, which is the bulk of AAUP and AFT's membership, that's qualifying employment. Now, it gets tricky because you have to work either a minimum of 30 hours or whatever your employer defines as full-time. So if your employer defines full-time as 40 hours, they don't have to sign any paperwork for public service loan forgiveness if you don't work to that threshold. You can combine multiple employers. That is totally an option, and it's something that I've helped many contingent faculty and adjunct faculty do, but you have to get all of the employers to sign the forms at once and send them in one bundle. One of the issues we started to notice a couple of years ago is adjunct faculty, contingent faculty would send in one school's form, then another school's form like a week later, and they kept getting rejected. And it's because the student loan company was receiving it, seeing that someone wasn't full-time and denying it, getting the second part of the form, seeing it wasn't full-time and denying them. So you need to bundle all of them together and send them in at once. If at any point you come across an employer that's refusing to sign your paperwork because you're a part-time contingent faculty, adjunct faculty member, you can reach out to your union and they can help advocate on your behalf. There's also a box you can check on the bottom of page 1 of the employment certification form that I'm going to talk about in a moment that says my employer is refusing to sign this, and then you take over the process. So the Department of Ed will call you directly and you don't need to worry about how your employer is being problematic or putting barriers in front of you. There's a way around it. But this is going to be the hardest thing for adjunct faculty, contingent faculty, because your hours can fluctuate semester to semester, quarter to quarter. What matters is you are full-time or can add multiple institutions up to 30 hours at the time you submit the form. And that's what I would encourage you to focus on. At the time that you submit the form, are you working 30 hours if you add all of your employees together? Caprice talked about this a bit at the beginning, that with the Affordable Care Act, there came the multiplier for contingent faculty to determine how to count hours. You should use that when calculating for the purposes of public service loan forgiveness. It's not just your classroom hours, it's holistically the preparation, the grading. I know this does not come close to the amount you actually work, but that is how the school should be looking at it. It's not just classroom hours, it's also using the multiplier to make sure that more of your work is captured. It's never enough, it's never all of it. And I know that this is something that I would encourage you to submit comments about. When I get to that, I'm going to talk to you about the way you can submit comments to the Department of Ed to change this particular regulation. This was not required by statute. Congress did not put this in there. The Department of Ed has put this in there, and they can take this out of there. This is the biggest barrier for contingent and adjunct faculty, and it's something that's got to go. But you can combine multiple part-time jobs, multiple employers, as long as they're public service employers. Send everything in at once. It's really dumb. You fax everything in. When you fax it all in one bundle so that they get page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 1, page 2, et cetera, et cetera. The final requirement, you have to make the right number of payments, which is 120 or 10 years worth of payments. So you need to make payments in full, which means you can't pay ahead and you can't pay too little. A penny too much is wrong and a penny too little is wrong. The Department of Education wants you to make precise, exact, full payments. You have to make these payments within 15 days of the due date of your monthly bill, which can be a problem for some people. I've worked with contingent faculty and adjunct faculty that set up auto pay, so it just went the first or second day of the month when they got their paycheck, or the 15th day of the month when they got their second monthly paycheck if they were paid bi-weekly or bi-monthly, and their due date was something completely different. So you have to set this up so that it's within 15 days of the due date. It's really dumb, it's really frustrating, but I have worked with people they've lost years of qualifying payments because they were paying too early, too late, a little bit too much, or a little bit too little. And after this, when we send out these documents, we can share some of the stories of people that were 47 cents behind 1 month, never knew. And then for the next year, every time they paid, they had 47 cents subtracted from that month to make up for the month before, which meant they were never making full payments. So you want to make sure that you're making full on-time payments. You can now, in the last couple of months, make prepayments for up to 12 months. Some employers, I know some universities have tuition reimbursement benefits and student debt reimbursement benefits where they will make a lump sum payment on your behalf. I know that some universities and colleges have been able to negotiate this. If you are one of those lucky members who have taken this to the bargaining table, which I'd encourage everyone to do, if your employer is making payments, they can do lump sum for up to 12 months for those due dates. You just need to make sure your student loan company properly disperses them over those 12 months. So if you're doing all of those things, if you have a direct loan, if you're in the right repayment plan, if you work for a public service employer full-time or at least 30 hours a week across multiple employers, and you're making on-time full payments, what you need to do is submit an employer certification form. This is how you check to make sure you're doing everything right. And the way this process works is that you will fill out the first page of this form. Jerry talks about this a bit. Your employer fills out the second page of this form, and then you fax it into Fed Loan Servicing. What Fed Loan Servicing is going to do is just initially determine if your loan is a direct loan. If it is, you're going to be transferred over to Fed Loan Servicing, and then they're going to look at your employment type. They're going to make sure that you work for a public service employer and that you're doing all those other things. And they're going to do that going back to October 1st, 2007, which is when public service loan forgiveness was created. Now, if you don't have a direct loan, you will not be transferred to Fed Loan Servicing. If you do have a direct loan, you will be at least one direct loan. That loan will be transferred to Fed Loan Servicing. So I saw before in the Q&A, which I currently can't see because I'm doing screen share, but I saw before someone asked about scam companies. Student debt relief scam companies are a real thing. They prey on adjunct faculty, contingent faculty, low-wage workers, everyone. I've worked with NASA scientists who have student debt that have been ripped off by these scam companies. They are predatory and they are bad. Fed loan servicing, well, they're pretty scammy. They're not one of the scam companies. So if you fill out this form and get transferred to them, do open up that piece of mail, do open up that email, do send these people money for as long as like they're a student loan servicing company. Not saying they're great. I don't necessarily trust them myself, but they're not one of those scam companies that someone asked about in the Q&A before. And we can talk more about the scam companies during the Q&A. So this is something, employer certification form. This is not something you have to do. There's no mandatory requirement that you do this, but it's something that I would recommend you do. I would recommend you do it annually or anytime you switch employers. The reason why is this is how you get Fed loan servicing to count your payments and tell you how many you've made, if you're doing everything right, and how long you have to go until your loans are forgiven. So if at some point you do fall $1 or $2 behind on those payments, this is how you get Fed loan servicing to tell you that you've fallen behind. So you know how to fix it then, because you don't want to make 5 years of payments, send this in, and then find out that none of those 5 years counted. You want to catch this early and you want to be able to deal with it in real time. So Fed loan servicing is the company that you currently send this to. They've just announced earlier this year that they are quitting. They don't like that they're being sued by so many state attorneys general. They don't like that they're being investigated. They don't like that all these things are happening to them. They liked before when there was no scrutiny, no oversight. They weren't being sued by teachers unions, educators unions. So they've announced that they're leaving. So what this means, and some of the other smaller student loan companies have also announced that they plan to leave. What this means is roughly 1 out of every 4 borrowers, like anyone with a student debt, the 45 million people, not just adjuncts and contingent faculty, but like 1 out of every 4 borrowers nationwide is going to have their loans transferred. There's a huge risk of transferring errors. We're talking about something like $400 billion of loans having to be moved in a 3-month period. I wouldn't trust Fed loan servicing to do it. I wouldn't trust like Cox Cable to do it. I wouldn't trust anyone to transfer that amount of debt with 0 problems. Something will go wrong. It's going to go wrong for individuals. The Department of Ed is going to aggressively try and get its money back. They are aggressively going to try and make you pay. Fed loan servicing is quitting. They're going to take very little blame for anything that goes wrong. So what we have advised people to do is update your contact information, ask Fed loan servicing to send your complete payment records, your complete payment history, and then file complaints anytime you think something's going wrong. You can file complaints with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, with your state attorney general. If you live in a state that's passed a Student Loan Ombudsman Act, you can file complaints with them, but don't wait for them to tell you something's gone wrong. If you think something's going wrong, file a complaint, build the paper trail. Then we get a lot of questions about, will there be broad debt forgiveness or cancellation? And we don't know. We hope there is. We are advocating. I know we've worked with both AAUP and AFT to advocate for broad-based debt cancellation. I can't tell you if there will be debt cancellation. I hope there is. We've also been told this payment pause extension to January 31st, 2022 is going to be the final extension. It may not be. They might extend it again. We don't know. The COVID numbers certainly don't look good. The jobs numbers have not been what everyone was hoping for. Those are different factors that could influence all of this. Also, we might see more of the student loan companies quit, and that might create a situation in which there needs to be another extension. As of today, they've said this is the final one. We don't know any more than you do. If we get any updates because you've registered for this, we can send updates. We get a lot of questions about who's going to take over for Fed loan servicing with the public service loan forgiveness accounts, and we don't know the answer to that either. The contracts are currently slated to end on December 14th, I believe. So until we get closer to that date, we don't know if more people are going to quit, like more companies are going to quit. We don't know who's going to get a new contract. That's something that's totally unknown right now. We hope it's not someone bad. We've got low expectations. And will servicers be ready for an influx of borrower requests as something like 10 million people get transferred to a new company that's never had that influx? We don't know. We know that currently the student loan servicing companies are telling the Department of Education their servicing capacity is at an all-time low because call center layoffs, furloughs, and shutdowns were very high during COVID, and we're seeing some of those again. We don't know if they're going to be ready. We don't necessarily know what that means. But as we get more clarity on that, we can definitely provide updates. Now, public service loan forgiveness, we've touched on this, has not gone how it was supposed to. It was supposed to be a very simple, work 10 years in the public service, have your loans forgiven, and everything was going to be great. But when the initial wave of forgiveness hit, we saw a 99% rejection rate. That's now been improved to a 98% rejection rate, which is not much of an improvement. And what we're seeing is, for the first time ever, this Department of Education under the Biden administration is asking individual borrowers to share their stories and hardships about accessing public service loan forgiveness. So this is our opportunity, this is your opportunity to actually shape what solutions get implemented. When the Department of Education had that initial 99% rejection rate, a dozen really smart policy wonks went into a room at the Department of Ed, came up with some solutions, and took it to a 98% rejection rate. Your voice, your story, and your experience could actually really make a difference here and highlight all the ways that people are being rejected. So this is one of the comments from a community college adjunct that was submitted that we thought was really powerful, because these are the kinds of stories the department needs to hear. You know, this is someone who just had the wrong loan type, but has been in repayment in the public service for decades. And as the department hears more and more of these stories, this is a type of bureaucratic red tape they could cut and lift. You know, another one from Rhode Island is someone who's been unable to get the relief that was promised to them because of the pointless barriers, the arbitrary and narrow barriers that the Department of Education's created. And we have until this Friday to submit comments to change these problems, to break down these barriers. The 4 criteria don't seem like a lot, but what it's amounted to is a 98% rejection rate. Hundreds of thousands of people being denied something they were promised because you've got the wrong type of loan, even though there's no difference between that loan and a direct loan. You're in the wrong repayment plan because your student loan company never told you you needed to switch. Your employer won't sign a form, which creates huge administrative burden on you to prove that you work in the public service. All of these things are so minor and so arbitrary, but they have such material impact on individuals living them. So we're going to drop the link in the chat, but if you go to this bit.ly or our Action Network page and submit your comment, we want you to tell your story. You've got till this Friday to tell your story, but any experience of getting misinformation, how student debt impacts you, how you've been rejected, why, you know, these are the stories that are going to move the Department of Education. These are going to be the things that get them to actually fix this so that people receive forgiveness. No one deserves to live with the burden of student debt that so many people have described in their comments to the Department of Ed. This is not how higher education should be run. This is not how any type of worker should have to live. One paperwork error should not be the difference between you being debt-free and you having $100,000 in debt. But with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to go into Q&A. We're going to bring Jerry and Caprice back. Any questions you have, we definitely want to get to, but do remember to submit your comment. We're going to be emailing out the link to you. We're all going to make sure it's in the chat, but this is your opportunity to tell the Department of Education where the red tape is the difference between debt forgiveness and a debt sentence. So with that, Jerry, Caprice, do you want to come back and we can start answering questions? Jerry, I see your video. Yep, you're unmuted. So did we get any Q&A during the presentation that would be
Grace,
helpful
do
to
you
go
want
over?
to start?
I don't, what are the questions? I mean, I may be able to ask answer a question I don't know.
Oh, okay. I'll read I think is the first one by Tricia. I took out a student loan for me to pay my university for my master's degree, and that was in 2006. I've been teaching here for 15 years, 10 years full-time, non-tenured instructor, and I'm still paying. Is there any way I can get loan forgiveness? Who could I talk to about that? Studentloan.gov, say to talk to my school. My school tells me to talk to loans.gov. Hopefully you're using studentloans.gov. Help.
So I'm going to quickly answer this, then I'm going to ask Jerry if she would like to jump in on this. But if you took out a loan in 2006, the first step is making sure it's not a FFEL loan and that you've consolidated it to a direct loan if it was not already a direct loan. But Jerry, you talk to members who are getting the runaround in this sort of way. What's the guidance that you would typically give them?
Yes, so for this one, the big thing is the 2006 number because the program didn't start until 2007. So that's the big thing. I would also make sure that you're going to studentloans.gov and not loans.gov is what was typed in the chat, because you can see all your loans. It's like the federal clearinghouse for student loans. So you can see all your loans and where they are and who you owe, however many times they've been sold. Mine were sold a lot of times. And the other thing, when you're talking about because you sign a different promissory note each semester, you also want to be careful about your interest rates. That's another thing when you're looking. Consolidation does not mean many into one. It can mean moving one at a time, and that's important to know. So I would say the key thing is the 2007, move it over into IDR, and to take a look at the studentaid.gov to be able, or studentloans.gov to be able to see exactly who you owe what to, I think would be important for you.
And the final thing I'll just say on this particular one, you can always call your student loan company. They are supposed to be the ones that help guide you through this. So if your school's giving you the runaround, if the website's not helping you, call your student loan servicer. They should be the ones helping you through this process. You can also reach out to Student Borrower Protection Center. I'll type this into the chat, but you can email us at pslf@protectborrowers.org, and we can also help you if you keep getting the runaround. Is there another question?
Next question is asking, and there are a couple of questions here asking for help. Who can help? Where can we, is there a workshop that can help? Is there a person who can help? And this is why I sent you that text. So, and can I make an appointment with somebody?
So Alyssa, for any AFT member, Alyssa is going to be talking about one service that the American Federation of Teachers provides its members. But generally speaking, the people that should be helping you with this, and we know too often they fall down on the job, are the student loan servicers. So if that terminology isn't familiar to you, this is Navient, this is Fed Loan Servicing, this is Mohila, Nelnet, Great Lakes. Those are the companies we're talking about. You can also visit, I see that someone put the forgivemystudentloans.org link into the chat. If you visit there, that's a website that's managed by a couple different public sector unions that has details and checklists that you can go through to make sure you're doing everything right. But the easiest way to get answers on that is to fill out the employment certification form, and that will tell you where breakdowns are occurring, if there are breakdowns occurring.
That's pretty much where we are right now, unless anybody wants to type in something else.
And if there are not any questions, we can hand it over to Caitlin and Alyssa Picard. So we'll just give it 30 more seconds.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
That Alyssa, you can go ahead and say yes if you're okay for me to offer my offer. Do you want me to do it now, or you want to do it after summer?
Yeah, no, please go right ahead.
The question I asked for of Alyssa and Chris is, like I said, I hold debt clinics every payday for our which is every other Wednesday. And if anybody is interested, it's an hour and a half. Again, not big, scary people. So it'd just be another layer to understand the process before you, or to help you talk with your servicer, gives you a little bit more background and information. So I will pop my, um, my contact information and my the link to be able to register for our next event in the chat box.
Yeah, then 2 questions just came in. I'm gonna answer them super quickly while Jerry does that. We'll take a final word from Caprice and then we'll hand it over to Caitlin and Alyssa. So we got a question about where to get this employment certification form or employer certification form. If you just Google those 3 words, employment certification form, it will be the first thing that pops up. It's on studentloans.gov. If you go to studentloans.gov and search public service loan forgiveness, you'll find the ECF form. We can also include that in the material follow-up for all those that registered for this webinar. It's a 6-page form. It's going to look intimidating. You fill out the first page, your employer fills out the second page. The rest is just definitions that go into the back of it. You don't need to do anything with that. So we'll send out the ECF as part of the material wrap up. So we've got that. Cassandra, I was working full-time at a college informally. I'm just reading this. So if you worked for a school that closed, you can still apply for public service loan forgiveness on the front page of the employment certification form or the first page of the public service loan forgiveness application. There's a box you can check that says your employer has since closed and you cannot have them fill out any of it. There is currently the part of the reason why you've not heard anything is there's a huge backlog stemming from the Betsy DeVos era. There's something like 150,000 people who have applied for public service loan forgiveness and have not yet received a determination on if their loans will be forgiven or not. So there's a chance that everyone who filled out a PSLF application and could be eligible to have their loans forgiven will be pushed back into repayment if the payment pause is not extended after January 31st. So we are aware that there are some people that should not be forced to continue to make payments that will be. Our hope is that the backlog will be cleared before the payment pause is over, or the payment pause will be extended to make sure they can get through that backlog. My understanding is if that does not occur, if you get pushed back into repayment and should have had your loans forgiven, they will refund the payments you've made in that period. But there is a pretty historic backlog during the Betsy DeVos era where it can take 6 months to up to 2 years to get a determination on this. So if you fall into that category, the best thing you can do is hold tight. And, you know, if you hit 6 months, I encourage people to resubmit the application just to keep the to force them to give some sort of update, but it can be a scary backlog. So if you have any questions, any concerns, you can reach out to Student Borrower Protection Center, AEP, AFT, and we can check in on this with you. But because of that backlog, there's little we can do, and it's very unfortunate. The one thing about student debt relief scam companies, the easiest way to spot a scam company is they ask you to pay for paperwork. Your student loan company will ask you for a monthly payment, but they will never ask you to pay to consolidate a loan. They will never ask you to pay to get into public service loan forgiveness. They will never ask you to pay to get into an income-driven repayment plan. If someone is asking you to pay money to complete paperwork, that is a red flag sign of a scam company. You should not pay someone to handle your student loans. If you go through summer with AFT, they are not going to ask you to pay. AFT offers this as a member benefit. If you go to a student loan company, they will ask you to repay your student loan, but they will not ask you to pay for a service. So the biggest red flag, the easiest way you can spot them is they ask you to pay those things. They ever refer to anything as Biden loan forgiveness, Trump loan forgiveness, or Obama loan forgiveness. That is also a scam. It's public service loan forgiveness. There's also there's no deadline, there's no dates. You don't have to submit something by a certain date. You can always do it later. So anytime you get a voicemail that says you've got 30 days to file this paperwork, otherwise you're going to not be considered for public service loan forgiveness, that is a scam. But with that, Caprice, would you want to just do any closing words on what adjuncts and contingent faculty need to do today before we hand it over to Caitlin and Alyssa?
Well, this whole webinar has been extremely illuminating to me even. And so if I had any advice, I would say get into one of these webinars, and I'll be calling you later to set up, see if we can set up one for the Colorado Conference of the AUP and have a statewide webinar.
They're going
because it would
each
be
closing
very welcome
remarks.
information for all of our members in Colorado. Right. Yes.
Cool. Well, Alyssa, Caitlin, we'll hand it over to you to wrap us up.
Caitlin and I are now trying to establish through eye contact on Zoom which one of us will be speaking first.
Speaking through suggestive eyebrow motions.
Yes. I'll just say very quickly what I have already said in the chat, and that is that I'm the director of the Higher Education Division of AFT. We are a point of contact to our higher ed affiliates, which we've got almost 250,000 members in, including Jerry and her members at UUP. But we also run the union's member-facing student debt programs, including the debt clinic program that Jerry's work is a part of, and our member benefit summer that Chris mentioned. If you are already an AFT member, you have access to summer. I have put the link up here in the chat at the end of a first kind of longer box of explanatory text. If you are not an AFT member and you would like to access summer, you can do that by becoming an AFT associate member. For that. Briefly, I will just say what summer does, like we started the debt clinic program so that we could teach our members the rules for going through the application process for income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness. What summer does, broadly speaking, is take all those rules and turn them into code and present the application process to you in a way that reflects you not having to learn all those rules yourself. And they have converted into code not only IDR and PSLF, but also a variety of state and occupation specific forgiveness programs. So when our members sign up to use Summer and they synchronize their federal student aid accounts with Summer's interface, what Summer does is kind of analyze their whole student loan situation and make recommendations to them about everything. If they've got private student loans as part of their loan package, if they've got some loans that might benefit from consolidation and some that would not, that is part of the recommendation also. And it is all recommendation, nothing about what the options that are presented to people when they sign up to use Summer is obligatory or mandatory for them at all. If they want to go ahead and do something like Consolidate or apply for IDR or even do the public service loan employer certification process, that can all be done through the interface with Summer, which takes a lot of the paperwork burden out of it, particularly for adjuncts and contingent faculty members who may otherwise have to track down employer certification forms from multiple employers multiple times, because we do recommend that everybody recertify their employment status annually. This is something we do as a member benefit, which is why it's behind our member benefits paywall. If you're already an AFT member, you can access it through that member benefits site. If you're not, you can join and get associate member access in order to give it a try. I'm also more than happy to talk with anybody who wants more clarity about whether this might be helpful for them. And I'll put my email address in the chat as well. We have about 10,000 members using it. The average person who is signed up for it is saving about $180 a month through income-driven repayment. And we have some really spectacular success stories of members who, typically people who are earlier in the process and like they're enrolling in income-driven repayment for the first time. But we do have some members who have saved $1,100, $1,200, even somebody $1,600 a month off of their student loan payments via signing up for income-driven repayment through Summer. I also want to underline what Chris said, critically important to us in the structure, in setting up the structure of this member benefit. Nobody is charged. We pay for it for our members as a member benefit because we think that message that you should never pay anybody for access to free federal programs like income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness is so important. We do not want to confuse it at all by creating a program that does anything like ask for a bank account number or a credit card or anything like that. None of those things happen to our members when they're using summer. It is fully paid for by the union as a member benefit because that core principle that these programs are free and that you should be able to access them without paying anything else is so important to us. So this is just a resource that's available for folks, and I'm happy to answer any other questions people have about it.
Cool. And I think the only thing I'll add on to that is just, next steps from here on what we can do in the movement. So certainly, as we have just 3 days left in the public comment period to share your stories, I would just encourage you to share the link that Chris dropped in the chat earlier to our Action Network form. Share it with all your networks on campus, with faculty, staff, anybody that might be eligible for PSLF. Just blast this out to your list to try and get people to share their stories from last time. And then, of course, like over the course of the next few months, we have an opportunity to convince the Department of Education to take further action to cancel loans for folks with PSLF or even beyond that. So if you want to support those efforts, please reach out to Alyssa or myself if you want to, support our campaigns on PSLF or debt cancellation further. And I think that's all that I have to say, although, of course, as Caprice indicated, we would love to run similar workshops for any AUP members that are still hanging out on the call. So hope to circle back with more info as